Thank you. Tap dancing, a uniquely American art form that's still popular today. Born out of African and Irish dancing influences, its start dates back to the 1800s. But I'm not here to talk about tap's history today. That's another talk. As an educator in the arts, I've spent the majority of my time teaching tap to thousands of students of all ages and abilities. And in recent years, I've seen a noticeable shift in some of my students. However, this shift hasn't been in their physical abilities, as you may think. It's actually been in their mindsets. So what is this shift or change that I'm seeing? Well, before I dive into that, let me back up a bit. Early in my time in college, I was fortunate to have a great history professor named Larry Cobb. Now, Dr. Cobb's class was one that students either loved or loved to be finished with. And as you may have guessed, I was in the first group. But I wasn't always. You see, I graduated high school and entered college with over a 4.0 GPA. And although I had received less than ideal grades from time to time, I'd always finished with straight A's. That was until Dr. Cobb's class. I quickly realized and learned after receiving my first paper back that Dr. Cobb's standards were remarkably higher than mine. And after receiving several similar grades, I worked with Dr. Cobb to improve my writing, which I thought had always been stellar. Now, this helped tremendously, but at the end of the semester, I still did not earn that A. I was devastated. I saw several of my friends and classmates earn an A, which made it even harder to take. In my mind, I had failed. And as the first in my family to attend college, I felt that I not only failed myself, but I'd failed my family as well. Now, after some time, I of course realized that this was not the case, and that Dr. Cobb had actually given me a great gift. You see, he helped me work through an issue that I didn't even know that I had, the fear of failure. He forced me to confront my inadequacies and work to improve upon them. Further, by doing so and not earning the A, I'd actually learned and grown more in the process. I hadn't failed at all, and no A could have given me that insight. This brings me back to my students. As was the case with me, all humans dislike failure. Most humans avoid failure at all costs. Failure hurts. It can be extremely painful and force us to confront a person in the mirror who we'd rather not meet. In recent years, I've seen a definite increase in the fear of failure in some of my students. I've witnessed students of different ages and abilities cry or get upset because they did not get something right. But I've also witnessed students of different ages or abilities cry or get upset without even attempting something for fear of not getting it right. The fear of failure. This forced me to take a hard look at many things, one of which was myself as a teacher. Now, I knew that because of my past experiences, I wasn't putting unrealistic pressure on them, but I also wasn't meeting them where they were. See, this is what Dr. Cobb had done so well for me. Although I was okay with my students making mistakes and learning through them, they weren't. And I had to learn how to train their minds before I could train their bodies. This is when I realized that actually I already had the perfect vehicle to help them. Tap dancing. You see, tap's an art form where you make the music that you also dance to. But in order to do this, the dancer must achieve a certain level of musicality and technique. This requires a good ear and aural skills. This is also where my students were having some of their greatest reservations. You see, unlike most things, tap forces you to confront your mistakes immediately. It forces you to have an accountability where it's impossible to hide. It either sounds right or it doesn't. It's either in rhythm or it isn't. It's instant feedback. And for the beginner, oftentimes it's less than ideal feedback. But the only way to improve is to hear where it's wrong. In other words, the only way to get to where you want to go is to go through where you currently are. I had to help my students develop what speaker and author Rory Vaden calls the buffalo mentality. You see, when threatened by a storm, unlike most animals, including humans, that turn and run from the storm, buffalo actually turn and run directly into it, effectively minimizing their difficult time in that storm. Mistakes and failures when learning are inevitable and necessary. And much like the buffalo, although uncomfortable, the only way to get to the other side is by diving in and pushing through the storm. I had to help my students learn to embrace their mistakes and even celebrate them. As leadership expert John Maxwell likes to say, I had to help my students learn to fail forward. We all celebrate when we do well. That's a natural reaction. A job promotion, passing a certification, even earning good grades. But these are all temporary successes and benchmarks along our journey. They are the direct result of other actions and choices that led to that outcome. They are the direct result of other successes or failures. And while we oftentimes celebrate the benchmarks, many times we actually forget to celebrate the habits and behaviors that actually got us there. Oddly enough, I've found that the more I celebrate mistakes and failures with my students as the thing that's propelling us closer to our goal, the more willing they've become to step outside of their comfort zone and leave the fear of failure behind them. I now openly talk about mistakes not only being okay, but encouraged. As long as they're making new mistakes and learning from their old ones, they're on the right path. And as was the case with me in Dr. Cobb's class with comparing myself to my classmates, they're learning to run their own race and to focus on what they can control. They're shifting their mindsets from the fear of failure to the ambition of achievement. I now see students who once cried or got upset smile with a level of self-esteem that can only be earned through one's own accomplishments. And ironically, in a culture obsessed with self-confidence, we often try to manufacture these feelings in our children without giving them the necessary experiences and tools that lead to genuine results. And in a world that is moving at an ever-increasing pace, it should be no surprise to us that our kids struggle with managing things that don't come instantly. That's why tap dancing is so different. It's what I like to call the microwave versus crock pot mentality. See, unlike a Google result that produces results instantly, tap's different and forces us to be patient while persistent. Vital skills for our kids to develop. So, am I suggesting that everyone takes tap dancing? No, of course not. Everyone's born with different skills, passions, interests, and gifts. What I am suggesting, however, is that as adults, we find activities and events for our kids that help guide them to manage failure as much as success. Developing these skills and perspective on life will be far more beneficial to them in the long run. And as teachers, I think it's imperative and incumbent upon us to know and recognize the various stages of inhibitions as well as the different ages at which they happen so that we can better serve our students. You know, Rory Vaden and John Maxwell are both absolutely right. The buffalo have got it figured out, and the only way to really fail is to fail forward. Failure does not define any person. It is a single event in our journey. And with that event comes an opportunity to learn and grow into a better person and a better artist. Let's help our future generations develop that mentality. Because if we do, it will change their lives. And they will in turn change the world. Thank you.